I don't even have that strong feelings about this movie. I just didn't like it. I thought it was bad, and that is that.
Like, I don't even have the energy to hate it.
I'm just like, yeah, okay. There, it happened.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Banterly, the Gen Z podcast about pop culture, media, and everything in between. My name is Suha.
And my name is Aidan, and welcome back, everybody.
Should we get into our question of the day?
Let's get into it.
Our question of the day is, would you ever get plastic surgery? Especially considering how normalized and widely talked about it is now.
Yes. I'm totally not against plastic surgery. I hope that I wait a long time before I do anything to touch, unless it's like required because I break my nose. But in the future, the number one thing that I want to do to start off is sometimes when I laugh really hard, you can see the vein in my forehead. I don't like that because it's been pointed out to me before and then it became an insecurity. And so there's a way that you can dissolve it, which has it could come with major complications, but
yeah, that's in your head, my guy.
So that's one thing. And then I'm sure I'll dive into Botox, but I don't want to even touch that until I'm in my 30s. Like, because I know you just have to keep going and going. And I've heard Botox in your jaw is really good for TMJ, and I suffer from that. So maybe I'll try that before I get into the forehead and, everything else. But never filler, never nose job. I'm fine with my nose. That's it for now. That's it. How about you?
You're conservative with it. I can appreciate that. I personally have talked about plastic surgery as a bit, where I've told all my friends that I'm going to get Botox before I'm 25. I'm not going to, but I just think for some reason that's kind of funny. I don't think I have anything personally against it. It's like one of those beauty things that I'm like, do I really want to spend money on it? It's the same way I feel about like getting like manicures and pedicures. Like to me, it's just like an upkeep thing. As you said, like when you start it, you kind of have to keep going with it. So I'm like, aren't there better things I could maybe spend my future money on? But if I ever were to, I would get the Botox that stops your sweating. Even though my friend who's in medical school has told me that has really bad repercussions, I don't care. Anything to stop me from sweating in these subway stations and making me feel disgusting all year round. So I would just love for them to inject it or whatever and just stop like face sweat, all that stuff. And then I would also just really like to fix my under eyes because I have really bad circles and darkness underneath them that I would be like, if we could get rid of those like wrinkles that I already see forming, that would be ideal. But I'm not desperate for any of it.
I like where we're both coming from. We're not eager to get under the knife. We're pretty content.
We are also quite young, so it'd be kind of depressing if we were.
I mean, there are people who started much younger than us, unfortunately, so...
I know, and that's so sad. I feel like that messes up, like, the natural cycle itself. I feel like it's one of those things... You know how, like, the running thing is, like, chapstick makes you need more chapstick? I feel like that might be similar with starting this kind of thing too early, and especially without a real medical consult. The people who are now like learning how to do Botox DIY with no medical consultation and not really aware of like the permanent ramifications.
For sure, and it is an addiction because people get hooked, and then like you turn out like Jocelyn Weinstein, the cat lady, and you're on the TV show Botched, which I used to watch, where they take care of botched surgeries, but it's one of those things where once you start, it is hard to stop. On the subject of plastic surgery, today we're going to be talking all about beauty standards because our episode is all about the new Netflix movie, Uglies.
All my life, I wanted to be pretty. I thought it would change everything. I hope that's still true.
It was actually initially planned as a movie in 2006 and then somehow shelved until 2020 when Joey King, who also plays the lead, Tally Youngblood, really great name by the way, decided she wanted to do the movies, and so she's an executive producer because she claims she grew up with them, which is strange because, like, as someone in that age group, I had never heard of Uglies.
I had never heard of Uglies, ever. And I was a reader back then, so.
Yeah. Weirdly, like, the release of the book and, like, the initial movie plan kind of predated the massive dystopia obsession of, like, the early 2010s. But now it just felt like the movie was a little bit late.
All my life, I wanted to be pretty.
For those who fortunately haven't seen it, I'm jealous of you. This movie takes place in a futuristic dystopia with enforced beauty standards where when you turn 16, I think you're required to do this pretty surgery that turns you pretty.
For those of you turning 16 today, you've waited your entire lives for this moment. All the flaws you have today will be gone tomorrow. With one elegant procedure, you'll be beautiful. Because everyone is accepted. No one is left behind.
Then after that, you get to live with the pretty people and the pretty houses. But it all follows Tally Youngblood, as you said, who's played by Joey King, who's awaiting the surgery. She's so excited for it. But she ends up embarking on a journey to find her missing friend, Shay, played by Brienne Chu, who escaped the city to join the resistance group, The Smoke.
Will you promise me something? No matter how pretty they make you, just don't let them erase you.
Promise.
You get the surgery, they tell you what to do, and that's it. Paris?
But they're after her. The person who is the antagonist in the film is Dr. Cable, who's leading all these surgeries. She's played by Laverne Cox. And then there's two love interests. There's Paris, played by Chase Stokes, who's her hometown bestie, old crush, who had the surgery turned pretty, and then was turned into some monster who was killing everybody. And then there's David, the leader of the Smokes, and he's cute, and he's sweet, and he's natural. So it's a love triangle in there, too.
You really get it all in this film, huh? Just everything is thrown in together. Some of the themes that the film attempts to explore are identity, societal pressure, and the value of individuality. Does it do any of them well?
No.
I'm not at liberty to say.
I never read this book, as we said, but in theory, I could see how this could be an interesting plot where we're kind of over-exaggerating our current society and how much attention and focus we put on beauty standards and how pretty you look and how you look online. But wow. There was little that I liked. I would say the only thing that I liked was the credits and the skateboards where they were flying around. That looked fun. But what I disliked was most of everything else. And I first watched this movie with my friend because she heard about it on Netflix. We watched it. I had never heard of it. We can watch some bad stuff together. Just a few weeks ago, we watched some Tubi movies. So that's just a general sense of what we can sit through.
Oh my God.
But the acting was bad. The scenes were just so choppy. It felt like the pacing was just so rushed and you didn't really get to land anywhere. It was just like one thing after the other after the other. I didn't understand anything, but it felt really unserious.
Yeah, I generally agree with what I liked. The credits were great because it meant the movie was over. The skateboards were interesting in that they were like the only tool of world building they really used. Like there is no effort put into this movie to actually make the good world seem good. I think at one point they have a casino party and then the skateboards are just like hovering. That like if you've watched The Good Place where they get to do the flying day in the first season.
We're going to start with something that everyone has always wanted to do. Flying. Now that you're dead, let's live a little, right?
Sorry.
It was kind of like that, like it's an added treat, which fun, but we didn't get any added treats. I kind of liked some of the music, except I don't think Maggie Rogers should have given them permission to use one of her songs. First, it didn't even fit the context in which it was used, and now it's also just ruined that Maggie Rogers song for me. I will say everything else I hated. Or not even hated. I'm so ambivalent about how much like this movie just doesn't do it for me that I couldn't even bring the energy to like hate it. The CGI is what really got me. I thought like when they kept panning to the mansion, it looked like a building they took out of The Great Gatsby and then like made in Photoshop really quick and put into this movie. The plot didn't make sense. It effectively started with one day climate change happened, and then to fix it, we decided to make everyone in the world pretty XOXO. The filming was so weird, and Tally was an ugly name. Like, what a bad name for that to be your. That's supposed to be your pretty name, because right now she's nicknamed Squint, and Tally is her pretty. What does that even mean? So, generally was not a fan, if you couldn't tell already.
So I don't know what your thoughts are on Joey King, but she gets roasted on the internet almost on the daily. She's one of those actresses that I just can't stand, but I don't have any valid reason. She just rubs me the wrong way. I haven't seen her act in anything great. I haven't seen her have a great performance. And that other Netflix movie that she was in earlier this year, Family Affair, fell asleep in the middle of it. So I don't know if she has some deal going on with Netflix where next month we're going to get a new Joey King film, but oh my god, she was in The Kissing Booth. Ugh. Forgot about that.
She was in Ramona and Beezus, and she rubbed me the wrong way from that day, and I've never looked back. She to like for me first in this movie, it's specifically hilarious that ugly Joey King, like when she's ugly, which is the vast majority of the movie, it's just normal Joey King. Like probably with a little makeup on too. But Chase Stokes, who plays Paris, who's her like, yeah, hometown lover boy, had to have a bunch of prosthetics when he was ugly and even when he was made pretty. But like they had to alter him to fit both. So I was just thinking about that the whole time. Not a big fan of hers, but somehow she wasn't even the worst part of the movie. The general concepts, I think, of uglies versus pretties first was like not set up well, but also it's like they didn't clarify what makes someone ugly and what makes someone pretty beyond some of the nicknames.
I mean, the pretty people had light hair and light eyes. Like I've always, when I was little, I wanted hazel eyes, like Rihanna. Like a black person with hazel eyes is, ugh. Every black person is beautiful, but that was whoa. And you always want what you don't have, but I'm sure someone looks at my beautiful brown eyes and are like, wow, I wish I had Aiden's eyes. But anyways,
Yeah, I think brown eyes are beautiful, but no, you're right. Like that is a weird thing to have clocked. I don't know, I felt like the Western beauty standards were very heavily pushed in I don't even want to say a subtle way because like within the first 10 minutes we hear the nicknames Squinty and Nose, which were like due to Joey King's allegedly squinting eyes and Chase Stokes' large nose, which was a prosthetic. And both of those feel like incredibly racialized features. You know, those aren't, and like they are explicitly treated as ugly here. So much so that those dictate what they've been called for the first like 15 years of their lives.
but then it was like kind of redeemed themselves when the leader of it all is like a black trans woman actress. So it's like, whoa, it's like, oh,
Right. What does that say about it all?
I know. It's like, and you're at the top, but it was
It was like,
interesting.
honestly, part of it felt like diversity casting in some weird way that didn't really fit the mesh of what the story was telling. So it got confusing when, yeah, like the leader is that, but like when you compare Paris before and after, he goes from brown hair, brown eyes, big nose to piercing blue Miley Cyrus meme eyes, platinum blonde hair, and just like very like Scandinavian Eurocentric features. And like even Shay and David, who were treated as like uglies, I thought they were both very attractive people. And it was weird that most of those in the resistance, or even generally those who were still considered ugly besides Joey King, were literally just like minorities.
Laverne Cox is a very talented actress, but I'm sure so no one could point their fingers and be like, why'd you make all the POCs, the resistance, and all the white people and like the Capitol? No, hey, we didn't do that. You see, Laverne Cox is the leader of the bad guys. We didn't do like, you never know what people just want to try to avoid a cancellation of some sorts, but you're right.
Right. Which, if I wanted to validate this as a more serious film, it would argue that like people of color also uplift bad beauty standards, but like it's just not a film even worthy of that discussion. I don't know if there were any scenes that like particularly stood out for you that either like really doubled down on how bad it was or maybe like brought it back to the dystopia thing.
The one that was just super choppy for me was when Tally first befriends Shay and they're like skateboarding, flying around everywhere.
I can't believe we've... See that, Tally?
Just felt like it cut from one to the other and one to the other. And I remember telling my friend, I was like, what is happening right now? Like, it feels like this isn't the final cut and they're supposed to add some transitions, but it was like a 2-minute scene cut. And then they're like, the two of them are just somewhere else. It was like for 30 seconds. And I was like, it was hard to follow. It was just distracting. But again, I love those flying skateboards. I would totally do that as a sport.
I know, they do seem fun. I think the one scene that delivered the dystopia feel was when Dr. Cable, who again is like Laverne Cox's character, but she found the smoke, the resistance group that Tally's now a part of, and has Paris kill David's dad in front of this whole group. And then everyone finds out that Tally is a snitch.
Paris, stop! Paris, stop!
And I think that was the only scene that kind of echoed the dystopian films that I liked growing up. Mostly because it was the only thing that like finally showed the errors, if that makes sense, of this world in a true manner of like authoritarianism, of dictating like personal belief.
You brought up kind of what makes a film a dystopic film. Did you have a favorite back in the day?
Unfortunately, I was basic, and so like actually no, I wasn't basic because I liked Divergent more than I liked Hunger Games. Was it all because I had a massive crush on Theo James? Yes. We grew up in a really good era of dystopian novels and like their film adaptations because it was also the first entry and like I think big era on social media that we got to witness. So not only were we talking about it with like other kids we went to school with or people we hung out with, but it was like there was online discourse about these movies that I think really set apart what it was like to dissect film online and build communities. But I think it's like all about also like the genre needs to be really well executed. So I don't know if there are like any common elements that you might look for in a dystopian story.
So I actually took a class in college about film, like dystopic and utopic film. It was like an online class during the pandemic, but some of the ones we watched were 1984, which is kind of the classic, in my eyes, like the blueprint for what this genre is all about.
In 1949, George Orwell had a vision of the future. Today, that vision is still a best-selling novel, and his prophecy remains as terrifying as ever.
If you want a vision of the future, Winston, imagine.
Checked all the boxes. They had complete control over people in the society, using propaganda, censoring free thought and free speech, and there was a loss of individuality, and it was enforced that you kind of stay within the binds of the society that the people at the top had created. And then, like in Uglies, there was kind of that resistance group who was deemed in the public like the bad guys. They're trying to destroy our society, but really they're the ones that are trying to save it.
But I think that was really like the benchmark for a great dystopian novel that does like bring in all those elements you kind of discussed. It was like really intelligently explicit with parts of it, but subtle with other parts, right? Like Big Brother is obviously a very explicit reference. The ways and the nuances it played out in daily life were really subtly laid out. Whereas like in Uglies, they have the terms uglies and pretties to describe you. Like he didn't even come up with unique names for these groups, you know? It's like there's no subtleties for the audience to explore at all.
Exactly, and not a whole lot to I remember being so confused. Like, there's so much to unpack with 1984 with all the like you said, like, the subtle little rules, and I remember doublespeak was a hard thing for me to comprehend as a I think I was in high school when I read that, but it was hard I was like, "Whoa, there was none of that in this movie," but maybe there's that in the book, but yeah, other ones that we watched were Brazil, Alphaville, Zardoz, District 9, and then Fight Club was actually in that theme.
That's interesting. I think there's like an interesting part of dystopia too that like mirrors the reality you live in, which is why I think it'll be like evergreen as like a writing or movie concept. It's like a critique on something that already exists now, but in its most extreme form. But yeah, I think like Hunger Games, Divergent. I know Handmaid's Tale was like a really popular series adaptation of a dystopian novel. But like the one that I forgot that was dystopian for some reason, but I really loved was Maze Runner.
Can you tell me your name?
I can't remember anything.
Who put us here? We don't know. What's out there?
The maze. Every morning when those doors open, the runners look for a way out. And no one has ever survived a night in the maze.
Which came out probably in the years right after Divergent, right?
Yeah, I think that was Dylan O'Brien, right?
Yes. Oh my god, he was iconic in that one.
I really wasn't into this genre a lot when I was little, I'm gonna admit. I read Hunger Games, I saw Hunger Games, but I think I only saw the first Divergent. I don't know if I even saw The Maze Runner, but it wasn't that interesting to me. You know, I was watching freaking X-Men. Like that wasn't I don't know, something about it was just I have a friend who watches Hunger Games Catching Fire like at least once a week and people who love Divergent. So it's no, but it's like there's still alive and well for people our age and I never got it.
And I think that's fair. I think for me it was like a huge community thing because I was not like into like I was not a Twilight person, for instance. And so this felt like a more accessible entryway for me to be like, yes, this is something I can talk to other people about that they also like and we can do the midnight premieres or whatever. But I think there was also an element of it like for preteens that it's like a rebelling thing, right? Where it's like, oh, we get to tell the adults that what they're doing is wrong. Like, I know for so many people, it's cathartic to see Katniss at age like 16 or 17 take on a man of like his 70s. Because I think when this stuff all came out too, it was really popular among millennials as well, who found themselves like they really thought they were fighting the fight at the time. Were they actually? Who's to say? And for me, I think it was part of like there was this like newfound realization of how messed up the world was. And so it was kind of fun and like cathartic to watch these films take those to an extreme and show like the youth have power question mark. But I will say I watched the Hunger Games last year for the first time in forever. And as a film it still holds up.
No, I rewatched them recently too. I get why I like those movies. I used to have the Katniss Barbie too. I loved her. I cut her hair. Anyways,
With this release and like I know that like there was the Hunger Games prequel and there's talks of like the Haymitch movie. Do you think there's going to be like a Gen Alpha dystopian obsession like we had?
I mean, maybe, I'm sure. I mean, history likes to repeat itself. If it does it in fashion, it might as well do it in media too. So I can't imagine that it won't happen with quality made films. Not like whatever this was. But if they already have like a fan base in general, I think it's easier to catch on, which is why that new Hunger Games probably did better than Uglies, because there's no like real there's the people who like the books, but the movies created a much wider reaching fan base that I'm sure the Haymitch and whatever is going to come out will be pretty well received.
Yeah, I wonder then, like my big question, and obviously like you're not necessarily the person to answer this, is if parents are introducing their children to these kind of movies still, like is Hunger Games still considered cool for like 12-year-olds? Or are parents, like millennial parents, are they maybe showing it to them? Or has there been a change in like what's deemed appropriate for children? Because, like, there is a decent amount of violence, and, like, the whole premise is, like, children killing children, so I wonder if, like, there's a new environment around that kind of media and, like, how young parents will let their kids view that. I'm just thinking of, like, the typical millennial or my typical millennial view who likes to draw on this kind of stuff and, like, pop culture. Harry Potter, Hunger Games were, like, their thing, and I wonder if that's a way they're showing, like, if Trump wins in 2024, this is what's gonna happen to our world, sort of thing. Like a tense political climate, like commentary almost.
Do you think that it would be likely that we turn into a society like the ones portrayed in these shows?
I think we're already there. I think, like, whenever I hear people say, like, oh, it's so scary, the idea of a dystopian world. We don't live like, dystopian just means a non-perfect world. So by the literary definition, we already live in one. These books and movies are a lot of time rooted in a reality that the authors are observing, and they're basically arguing, like, what is the most extreme version of this, and building out that world via, like, fictional writing. And so, I don't know, I think even in this movie with Uglies, this movie was not smart, and I'm not saying we should take it as, like, a, "Oh my god, be fearful of the uglies versus pretties war," but I think the basis is really relatable of, like, it's those who get to protect and elevate their physical state, which are, like, the rich who can't afford Botox, who can't afford plastic surgery, who can't afford access even to general health care, live a significantly more privileged life than people who can't have access to even, like, a healthcare plan, or especially those who don't have access to a personal trainer or healthy eating options or something like that. So I don't know, I feel like we're kind of already at that dystopian reality in a way.
I agree, and I think especially with this one that touched so much on beauty standards, it kinda reminded me of that Black Mirror episode Nosedive with Bryce Dallas Howard.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're kinda not talking to Jess.
3.1? What happened?
Him and Gordon split up.
Oh, poor Jess.
No. We're all on Gordon's side.
Sure.
Where you're, like, rating people and everyone's happiness and social standing is based on how you rate them.
I need more short term, like, much more.
Then you'll need a boost.
What kind of a boost?
Well, most of your interactions are confined to your inner circle, and they're largely, pardon the term, mid to low range folks. Same with your outer circle. You've got a ton of reciprocal 5 stars from service industry workers, but there's not much else. At least as far as I can see. So in terms of quality, you could use a punch-up right there. Ideally, that's upvotes from quality people.
Quality people.
High 4s. Impress those upscale folks, you'll gain velocity on your arc, and there's your boost.
Uglies was kind of an exaggerated version of how we as a society will face-tune ourselves and edit and use filters, but we're not at that point yet, and I don't know if we ever will be, because all these things, at the end of the day, they are just fiction, and I'm sure that someone 100 years ago would think that something that we use regularly now, like an iPhone, which may look really dystopic to them, feels normal for us. So I think it's all about relativity, and also the predictions they made. If you look at those pamphlets from the 50s, flying cars and like, I'm sure that'll come out maybe soon. I'm sure like Elon Musk is on that, but by no means is everybody driving a flying car, even if they do exist. It's not for everybody. It's all just fiction. It's all just people's imagination. And the themes are very present. Like you said, they're just making observations in society, and the themes are definitely there. But the actual specifics of the capitals and the districts, I think we are so far from that, if that ever even happens.
I think that's fair. Everyone's like, "Oh my god, we're gonna end up in the Hunger Games." I don't think that's realistic. Are there elements we can pull from the Hunger Games? Absolutely there are. But I feel like a lot of these movies also depict dystopia in a way that pulls off of the former Soviet Union or non-capitalist societies, where there's this imagery of, like, really drab buildings, a lack of individual focus, and, like, maybe a less clear upward mobility structure than a capitalist society affords. And so I think that, like, it just could be argued we've already been there in parts of the world, and that it could return, but, like, not the one where we're all subjected at gunpoint to Facetune. that's not the dystopia that I imagine we'll find ourselves. Kind of like a media literacy thing of like, no, the world is not going to be Uglies starring Joey King. It might pull, though, on like access to beauty or like what is beauty and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. Have you thought of what might freak you out in like 100 years? Because you said people 100 years ago might be freaked out, but like, how would you imagine that world and would you be freaked out by it, do you think?
Oh, you know what would freak me out the most is if in 100 years we're back like slavery and we had rights, we had like women's reproductive rights and gay marriage and no Jim Crow laws and black people and white people can marry and immigration in the country. And then what would terrify me is if 100 years we're back to where we were in the 1920s with all of those things that I just mentioned not happening. Like women can't have a credit card, women are homemakers. Like
Mm.
that would frighten me. Not the freaking skateboards flying or being stuck in District 12 or having to be forced to compete in a game where I kill people my age. That's all fine and dandy, but terrifying that we're going backwards in terms of the real stuff. Like that's really scary.
That's a very valid fear, I think. Yeah. Part of me is deeply, deeply happy that I will be dead by then. So like I'm not totally worried. And I also like don't have children. So I'm not like currently fearful of the world they might live in, you know? But I imagine that if the world does still exist in the year 2124, I imagine that like I think growing disparities would have reached a head with like larger in access to like AI tech and resources where we very well could go backwards or we could just keep bludgeoning down a path of like the one we're currently on. I don't know how much longer that's sustainable though, but part of me also thinks that like the world could simply not exist as a result of the climate crisis. So I try not to think that far ahead.
Oh, let's not dwell on it. Should we end on a lighter note this episode?
I could be down. What are you thinking?
I think that we should read some of our favorite Letterboxd reviews.
Letterboxd review time.
You already said it got a what, 1 point something on Letterboxd? 1.4.
Got a 1.4 on Letterboxd.
16% Rotten Tomatoes. So
16% on Rotten Tomatoes.
I will start. So my three are: Shay wanted to have lesbian sex with Tally so bad, which is something that I clocked. I couldn't tell because every time Shay asked about Paris, it looked like she was jealous in her eyes that she had a lover at home. Anyways, and then someone else said, imagine being casted to be ugly. Literally Joey King, like you said. And then also, this movie would have done numbers in 2011. In 2024, it's a poorly acted, rushed, and deeply unserious movie. Agree.
Okay. The first of mine is, did I just watch a 90-minute Facetune ad? Which is so true, because that's literally the technology it looks like they used to make people pretty. The second one, I think, is arguably my favorite of the three, but it's literally just, bitch, you better be joking.
Sure. Okay.
And I was like, that's a great way to respond to this. And my last one was an expulsion of putrid gas from the bloated corpse of the YA dystopia genre. I agree with all of these. I don't think I could have said it better myself. Thank you, Letterboxd, for your service today. As much as I didn't like this movie, it was kind of fun to revisit the dystopia genre. I wish it was in a different film, though.
Yeah, like I said, I would have rather watched like a 20-minute YouTube video of people riding those CGI skateboards through the woods than watched an hour and 40 minutes of whatever this was. But hey, maybe someone learned something. Maybe some younger person who was watching it learned that it's okay to have squinty eyes. It's okay to have a big nose, because that's the message that they were trying to teach. That was what they were trying, and I hope maybe someone walked away with it, but I doubt it, because why? How could you understand that? If you saw the movie, share your thoughts with us at Banterly at immigrantlypod.com and engage with us on our socials. Immigrantly Media on Instagram and Immigrantly Podcast on TikTok.
Banterly is produced by Shay Yu, written by us, the co-hosts Suha, Musa, and Aidan Taylor, and the executive producer and editorial review is done by Sadia Khan.
Our sound designer and editor is Lou Raskin, and the Banterly theme music is by Simon Hutchinson. Additional music is by Epidemic Sound.
See y'all next week.